Hello, everyone. We are the Week 1 Climate Ambassadors reporting, I guess, kind of live from COP30.
All right, so you might be asking yourself, what is COP and what is the UNFCCC? So the UNFCCC is an international treaty that provides the framework for global cooperation in addressing climate change. Under it, there is COP, or the Conference of the Parties, which is a meeting held where countries negotiate commitments and actions to reduce emissions and strengthen global climate action. A big focus for Brazilian President Lula's vision for COP30 has been one guided by a call to action, which we'll be demonstrating throughout this presentation.
Yeah, so the UN Climate Summit participants includes four categories. The parties include the 197 nations that are a part of the UN. The observers can include students or scholars who can observe the negotiations but are not necessarily delegates of the parties. The press and media include the press and media. And the indigenous groups are essential to this COP30 in prioritizing their voice and making sure they have a spot in the room.
All right, this is Audrey Fleming. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the structure of the spaces and the functions that they serve at COP. So you're looking now at a map of, on the top, the two main zones as the spaces are divided into each of these, the blue zone and the green zone, which we'll discuss here in a second. And on the bottom, you can see a close-up of the map of the blue zone specifically. And I just will highlight that this is a huge space that is continuing to develop. And we see it continue to be built as COP goes along. So I'm going to move ahead now and look at the blue zone and talk about the structure and what it does. So here the blue zone is effectively a restricted area, meaning you need to have a badge to access the zone. This year it was particularly restricted in that very few badges were given out comparatively to past COPs. Within the zone, there are two main purposes for the spaces. One is for political collaboration of the parties. So in these spaces, you have things like negotiations, plenaries, roundtable discussions, and also action and organizational meetings. The space within the blue zone also serves to inform and inspire action. And we see this through a number of the other structured spaces. Things like the uh, pavilions that exist where states and NGOs can provide information to participants. There are press conference spaces and news media rooms. And also we find throughout this COP in particular, a lot of art propaganda pieces to inspire climate action change. The green zone is also focused on creating change. It also has two main purposes: to form and educate, as well as to inspire action. And it is done through one, allowing massive participation. So usually the green zone is ticketed, but unrestricted. This time, tickets aren't even required, as again, in focusing on action, Lula has opened up participation within the green zone to include everyone without getting prior validation to go. So we're seeing large population of the Brazilians in Belém coming to be a part of the green zone and taking part in it. And within this, we're going to see a number of the things that we saw in the other areas, presentations, demonstrations, cultural events that are going on, protests, and some small pavilions as well to educate and inform.
So in our experiences at the first week of COP, I had the privilege of going to the first 2 days of the Blue Zone. In particular, I went to a side event on the BTR panels, BTR as in Biennial Transparency Report. A major theme of COP30 is to increase transparency as a major mechanism for actually having climate action. And so in this report, this was the first time that we're actually seeing a conglomeration of the party reports and their efforts to combat climate change. Particularly, something that interested me and I think would be informative for you all is just to notice how all of the parties are really looking towards youth as an integral actor in effective climate action. I can turn to part of one of the panels, which is looking at the different stakeholders that global leaders are looking towards, and that includes non-party stakeholders such as corporations. We have gender, and then 52% of global leaders and parties at this conference recognize youth as a real driver of climate action. So that's something important to consider as an Austin College student and also as a part of the youth population.
Yeah, and for my time at the Blue Zone, I witnessed some of the indigenous peoples that were represented at COP30. They had voiced that UN and COPs are complicit not only in the destruction of the forest, but in the murders of their people. So during one of the press conferences that I went to, one of the members of the Ashianka tribe, they had stated that just yesterday, 7 people were murdered in the Atalaya state. And so, again, the indigenous peoples are really pressing for COP and the United Nations to not only just give them a space to speak at these presentations, but also to implement funding and people-centered solutions, specifically indigenous knowledge and technique solutions for them.
And so, kind of as it's been stated, the Green Zone was very much about disseminating information and then also engagement with the local community, since there is such a large amount of local people who have been attending this conference. And one of the main focus of the Green Zone as well has been access to clean water, which is actually a challenge that the region of Para has been faced with. They emphasized this through ensuring free water is provided to everyone throughout the event. And one booth that addressed this particularly was Aguas de Para, which was founded in September of 2025. It's the largest public-private water sanitation partnership in the Amazon region, providing clean water, sewage collection, and sewage treatment to several municipalities within the Brazilian state of Para, including Belém, which is where we are and the conference is. At its booth, as you can see on that picture to the right, the company had an immersive VR experience where you sit on this little boat and you wear a VR headset, and it takes you through a boat ride through one of the Amazonian communities called Villa da Barca, which is a large stilt house community in Belém, which you can see in the background of that. Um, Showcasing its work in these vulnerable areas, where after just 3 months of work, they were able to install clean water infrastructure, which helps ensure access to clean water, proper sewage treatment, and then just overall improving the living conditions of these historically underserved and at-risk communities. So you might be asking, what's next at COP30? Well, one thing that's coming up is the challenges, or that's come up is challenges to the IPCC, which is the body that does the scientific studies behind that advises some of the climate action taken. So there's been some states and parties that have challenged the legitimacy of the scientific research produced by them. Some parties have insisted that they would like to look not just solely at the IPCC's reports, and they would like the ability to rely on their own preferred scientific studies, which opens up a whole can of worms and it is a hotly debated topic right now.
And as I stated previously, the indigenous peoples are becoming more vocal about the ethnocentric techniques and implementations that are funded by COP and the UN. And one of the things that they are basically stating indirectly is that COP30 is prostituting the image of the indigenous peoples. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they express their concerns in the next week.
And lastly, as it concerns foreign domestic relations with the United States and the their pulling out of the Paris Agreement and their lack of representation at this particular COP. We're seeing that a lot of parties have addressed concerns about the US's absence at negotiations, particularly because they have in previous COPs been played a major role in mitigating tensions between different party coalitions in negotiations. So with their absence, we're seeing a lot of rising tension, some of it being even in open negotiations that our members have personally been of witness to. And so we're going to see the fruition of that tension in the delaying of progress of these important global policies as it concerns climate change in these next coming weeks at the conference. So that's the end of our presentation. If you're interested in learning more and more in-depth information about what's going on at COP30, I would highly recommend following our AC.climate Instagram. Each of us are doing in-depth reports about not only our particular interests, but main themes of COP30 and the things that are going to be addressed. So absolutely recommend following.
Additionally, we have some follow-up questions for y'all, but let's work together, as we would say. And we just have some discussion questions here. Feel free to maybe take a different angle, but these can help guide the post-presentation discussion because, you know, we've worked really hard to bring this information to y'all, and we're very thankful for the opportunity to have y'all listen to the information that we've been able to experience.
That concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.